June 14, 1944. 17:06 hours. A hedgerow line outside Saint-Lô, France. The shot lands before the sound finishes traveling. You can almost feel it, the blunt punch, the sudden heat, the way the body reacts faster than the mind can understand. The American soldier jerks sideways, shoulder snapping back as if yanked by an invisible hand. His rifle dips, his balance wavers, blood blooms dark and fast through his field jacket. German voices surge from the hedgerow ahead, close, confident, energized. Boots churn earth, rifles come up in practiced rhythm. The bullet did what bullets are meant to do. They hit first. Smoke hangs low, thick with crushed leaves and cordite. The air tastes metallic. The world narrows to a tight tunnel of sensation, pain, breath, weight, noise. The soldier does not fall. Private First Class Thomas Hale, 29th Infantry Division, forces his boots deeper into the mud. His knees want to give. His body argues for gravity. Something older and harder refuses. The Germans keep advancing. They come tight and fast, formation compressed by the narrow lanes between hedges. Faces set, rifles steady. They saw him take the hit. They saw his posture sag. In close fighting, assumptions become decisions. He's finished. Another step, another. That decision is fatal. Hale brings the muzzle up, not clean, not smooth, but controlled enough to matter. His hands shake, not from fear, but from the body's last reserves being dragged forward by adrenaline. The first burst detonates at arm's length. The sound is violent in the hedgerow, a tearing roar that seems to shred the air itself. The nearest German collapses forward, momentum carrying him into the man behind. A second stumbles, boots tangling with a falling body. There is no pause. Hale fires again. Packed together and unprepared for resistance from a man they believed already dead, the Germans have nowhere to go. Bullets tear through wool and flesh at point-blank range. Shouts replace orders. Surprise fractures discipline. You can almost see it. The exact instant confidence collapses into confusion. Hale sways now. The wound is catching up. Blood runs freely down his side, soaking trousers, dark and heavy. His vision blurs at the edges. The world tilts. He keeps firing. An officer tries to shout commands, voice sharp and urgent, but the sound is swallowed by gunfire and screams. Men push backward, then forward again as bodies block retreat. Someone drops a rifle. Someone tries to turn and can't. Another burst. Another body hits the dirt. Time stretches here. Seconds feel elastic, pulled thin by terror and adrenaline. Later, survivors will argue about how long it lasted. 10 seconds, 20, Maury. In the moment, it feels endless. Hale's legs finally begin to fail. His knees buckle a fraction. He leans forward instinctively, using the weapon as a brace. The muzzle stays level. He fires again. The Germans are no longer advancing. They are reacting, ducking, twisting, colliding with each other in the narrow corridor of hedge and ditch. Surprise has become panic. This was not supposed to happen. His breathing turns ragged, each inhale a fight. The wound burns, his ears ring. The world feels too bright and too far away. Still, he fires. A German crumples at his feet. Another slams sideways into the hedge, branches snapping under sudden weight. The tight formation that moments ago felt unstoppable is now a trap of their own making. Someone finally fires back. The return shots are wild and rushed. A round snaps past Hale's head, close enough to stir his hair. Another punches dirt near his boots. It doesn't matter. The damage is already done. Only now, only after bodies begin to stack and the advance grinds to a halt, do the Germans understand what they misjudged. The man they shot first did not fall first. Hale tries to step. His legs refuse. The weapon slips slightly in his hands. He corrects it out of reflex, fires one last controlled burst, and then gravity wins the argument his body has been losing, since the first bullet struck. He hits the ground hard. The impact knocks the air from his lungs, mud smears his face, his fingers loosen at last. The gunfire from his position stops as suddenly as it began. Silence crashes in, heavy, shocked, unreal. For a heartbeat, no one moves. German soldiers stare at the fallen figure, eyes wide, chests heaving. The hedgerow is littered with their own dead and wounded, positions abandoned, momentum shattered. The counterattack is over. Not because of artillery. Not because of reinforcements. But because one man, shot first and written off, refused to fall when the moment demanded it. Nearby, American voices rise cautiously, disbelief threaded with relief. Someone crawls forward. Someone swears softly at what they see. Medics will arrive minutes too late for Hale, but not too late to understand what happened. Later, numbers will be argued over, counts revised, reports softened. But everyone who was there will agree on one thing. They shot him first. And it was the last mistake they made that day. The silence doesn't last. It never does. June 14th, 1944. 17:08 hours. Same hedgerow, same ground, now changed forever. The first American voice breaks the stillness, low and disbelieving. Jesus, look at this. Men crawl forward from shallow scrapes and shell holes, rifles still up, eyes scanning for a countermove that never comes. Smoke drifts lazily now, thinning, revealing what the noise hid seconds ago. Bodies. Too many bodies. German soldiers lie tangled in the narrow corridor between the hedges, some face down, some on their backs, some twisted into positions no living man holds. Rifles are scattered, helmets cracked or flung aside. The tight formation that moments earlier pushed forward with confidence has collapsed into a heap of confusion and silence. At the center of it all lies Private First Class Thomas Hale. He hasn't moved since he hit the ground. A medic slides in beside him, hands already red before he even begins. He checks for breathing, for a pulse he already suspects won't be there. He shakes his head once, small, final. You can almost feel the weight of that moment, relief colliding with loss, victory poisoned by its price. An officer crouches nearby, staring down the hedgerow, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. His mouth opens, closes, he doesn't speak. There are no words that fit yet. Behind them, farther down the line, German survivors are pulling back, fast, disorganized, wounded dragging wounded. No one is shouting commands anymore. The counterattack that was supposed to roll through this sector has shattered in less than a minute. Not by numbers, by shock. American soldiers begin counting without meaning to. One points, another shakes his head. Someone whispers a number that sounds impossible. Someone else argues back, insisting it can't be right. Later, in after-action reports, the language will be careful. Enemy casualties heavy. Assault repulsed at close range. Individual action decisive. But here, in the hedgerow, no one bothers with careful words. They know what they saw. A lieutenant kneels beside Hale, eyes fixed on the still face now smeared with mud and blood. He didn't know Hale well, maybe not at all, just another rifleman on the line. Until he was. The lieutenant stands slowly and looks around. Men meet his eyes, waiting. Something has shifted, not just tactically, but psychologically. Moments ago, they were bracing for being overrun. Now the ground in front of them is silent. That realization spreads outward like a ripple. Down the line, other American units hear the gunfire stop too abruptly. They expect a renewed push. They don't get one. Runners arrive with fragments of information. Counterattack broke. Germans pulled back. You won't believe what happened up there. German officers, regrouping behind the hedges, are asking their own questions. Why did the assault stall? Why did the point element collapse? Why were there so many casualties in such a short distance? Survivors talk over each other, voices tight, eyes wide. They describe a wounded American who didn't fall, a man who kept firing after he should have been dead, a space so narrow that retreat became impossible. Some exaggerate, some don't need to. The result is the same. Momentum is gone. In warfare, momentum is fragile. It lives in confidence, in belief that the next step forward will be rewarded. When that belief shatters, even superior numbers hesitate. German commanders call off the push. They reposition. They wait for artillery that won't come in time. They try to understand how a single point of resistance collapsed an entire effort. They never get a satisfying answer. As dusk creeps closer, American engineers move forward to reinforce the position Hale died holding. Wire goes up, fields of fire are adjusted, orders are passed quietly. But the men are different now. They talk about Hale in fragments. Did you see how long he stayed up? They thought he was done. He was. You can hear it in their voices, the mix of awe and unease, because what Hale did doesn't fit neatly into doctrine. It can't be planned. It can't be replicated on command. It just happens. A captain finally puts words to it during an evening briefing. That counterattack should have rolled us, he says, tapping the map. They had the numbers, they had the angle, they had us compressed. He pauses. They didn't have the seconds he bought us. Those seconds matter. They allow reserves to reposition. They give machine guns time to resight. They let commanders breathe and think instead of react. Hale's stand doesn't just stop an attack, it resets the fight. Night falls over the hedgerows, the dead are gathered, the wounded are moved. Hale's body is carried back under a poncho, boots leaving a final trail in the mud he held so long. No one speaks as he passes. Somewhere behind the lines, a clerk will eventually type his name onto a report. The wording will be precise, the tone restrained, the chaos reduced to lines of text. It won't capture what the men here understand instinctively. That the Germans didn't lose this ground because of firepower alone. They lost it because they believed a man was finished and acted on that belief. And belief, when wrong, is deadly. As darkness settles, American soldiers take their places again, rifles resting on the same hedgerows that minutes earlier were almost overrun. The line holds. Not because it was strong, but because one man refused to fall when the story demanded it. And that refusal is about to echo farther than anyone realizes. June 14th, 1944. Nightfall. The same stretch of Norman hedgerow. Darkness changes everything. The hedgerows that trapped the Germans earlier now feel like shelter again. Stars appear in narrow strips above tangled branches. The smell of cordite fades, replaced by damp earth and crushed leaves. Somewhere far off, artillery mutters, but here the line is quiet. Too quiet. American soldiers sit low in their positions, helmets tipped back, cigarettes cupped carefully. No one sleeps. Not yet. The adrenaline hasn't drained, and something about what they've just witnessed refuses to settle. Private First Class Thomas Hale's name moves down the line slowly, passed in murmurs, never spoken loudly. Men repeat pieces of the story as if saying it out loud might help them understand it. He was hit first. He stayed up. They didn't know what hit them. Each version is slightly different. Each one grows a little. That's how battlefield legends are born, not from exaggeration, but from disbelief that reality could be so sharp, so fast. A platoon sergeant kneels near the hedge, tracing the ground with his finger. He counts steps, measures distance, shakes his head. They were stacked up, he mutters, too close. Too close. That phrase matters. German doctrine favored aggression in counterattacks, close pressure, speed, shock, but doctrine assumes resistance breaks when the point man falls. It assumes the first hit removes the threat. Hale broke that assumption. German survivors don't sleep either. Farther back, beyond the hedgerow maze, a junior officer listens to his men talk over each other. Their voices are tight, embarrassed, angry. They don't want to admit what happened, but they can't avoid it. He was wounded. We saw him fall, almost. He kept firing. The officer rubs his face, dirt streaking across his skin. He knows how this will sound to command. He also knows how it will sound if he leaves it out. Either way, something is wrong. That night, German patrols are cancelled in the sector. Orders come down to hold positions, regroup, reassess. The push that was supposed to regain ground before dawn never materializes. Not because the Germans lack men. Because they lack certainty. Back on the American line, a lieutenant finally allows himself to sit. He stares at the hedge where Hale stood, replaying the sequence again and again. He thinks about timing, about the men who were repositioning behind Hale when the counterattack hit. They lived because of seconds. Seconds Hale bought with his body. The lieutenant realizes something uncomfortable then, something officers rarely say out loud. The plan failed. The preparation wasn't enough. Doctrine didn't save them. A single soldier did. That realization doesn't feel reassuring. It feels fragile. Because if survival depends on moments like that, on men who refuse to fall, then the margin between holding and collapse is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Later, a runner brings word from battalion. The counterattack has been officially logged as repulsed. No mention of how close it came, no mention of Hale yet. That will come later. Or maybe it won't. War is selective about what it remembers. As midnight passes, rain begins to fall lightly, tapping helmets and leaves. Mud thickens, rifles are wiped down, watches are checked too often. Someone finally asks the question no one wants to answer. Would you have done it? No one replies. Because they all know the truth. You don't decide something like that ahead of time. You don't volunteer for it. You don't rise to it because you're brave or strong or prepared. You fall into it. Hale didn't choose to be hit first. He didn't choose to be the point where the attack broke. He chose only in the last seconds to keep standing. That choice changed the night. It also changed how the Germans will attack this sector again, slower, wider, more cautious. They will probe, they will shell, they will hesitate where they didn't before. Hesitation saves lives. On the American side, as dawn approaches, officers begin drafting recommendations. Words like extraordinary and selfless appear. A medal is mentioned, then underlined, then questioned. Because medals require witnesses. Witnesses require certainty. Uncertainty is rare in hedgerow fighting. What is certain is this: the ground held. Hale's body is moved again at first light, carried farther back now, away from the place where everything happened too fast to process. A chaplain murmurs words no one quite hears. Helmets come off briefly, then go back on. The war doesn't pause for grief, but it absorbs it. As the sun lifts over Normandy, lighting the same hedgerows that swallowed men the night before, American soldiers prepare for whatever comes next. They know one thing now. Being shot first doesn't mean the fight is over. And somewhere in the German ranks, that same lesson is being learned, with bitterness and restraint. The line will be tested again. But it will never be tested the same way. Because one man proved that the moment everyone assumes is the end. Sometimes is. June 15th, 1944. 06:40 hours. A command tent several miles behind the hedgerow line. The paper is still damp when the clerk feeds it into the typewriter. Keys clack softly, clinical, detached. Words appear that feel too small for what they're trying to contain. Enemy counterattack repulsed. Casualties sustained. Individual action decisive. That's it. No description of the way time bent. No explanation for why an assault collapsed in seconds. No language that can explain how a man already wounded changed the outcome of an entire push. The report moves up the chain anyway. Officers read it, nod, and pass it along. They are trained to compress chaos into paragraphs, to turn terror into bullet points. It's how wars stay manageable on paper. But even here, something feels unfinished. A battalion commander pauses longer than usual over the last line. He taps the page with a pencil, frowning. "Who was this soldier?" he asks. No one answers immediately. They have a name now, Private First Class Thomas Hale, but names feel inadequate. Hale wasn't supposed to matter at that scale. Riflemen don't alter operations, they execute them. Except sometimes they do. Back at the line, Hale's platoon is already moving again. New ground, new hedgerows, same tension. The men walk past places where the earth is still dark from blood and rain, stepping carefully, almost respectfully. They don't talk much. You can almost feel it, the weight of something unfinished hanging over them. The sense that what happened yesterday hasn't been fully accounted for. German forces probe later that afternoon, cautiously this time. Longer intervals, more space between men. They don't stack up the way they did before. They fire from farther back. They test instead of rushing. The change is subtle, but it's real. One German NCO watches the American line through binoculars, jaw clenched. He remembers the sound of gunfire erupting from a place he thought was safe to advance into. He remembers bodies falling where confidence should have carried them forward. He adjusts his spacing without being told. That's how lessons spread in war. Not through manuals, through memory. By evening, word of Hale's stand has traveled farther than any official report. Men in neighboring units talk about it in low voices. The details shift slightly with each retelling, numbers grow, seconds stretch, but the core remains. He was hit first. He didn't go down. He stopped them. Somewhere along the way, Hale stops being a man and becomes a reference point. Remember what happened up there. Don't bunch up. Don't assume. For American troops, the story does something else. It tightens resolve. Not in a heroic, flag-waving way, but in a quieter, more dangerous one. It reinforces the idea that the line can hold, that even when plans unravel, resistance still matters. That belief is powerful. It's also fragile, because it rests on moments that can't be repeated on demand. That night, an officer finally writes a letter, slowly, carefully. He's not sure how to describe what Hale did without sounding dramatic or dishonest. He settles for honesty. "Your son was wounded early in the engagement," he writes. "He continued to fight under extreme conditions. His actions prevented the enemy from breaking through." He stops there. Anything more feels like too much. Anything less feels like a lie. In the days that follow, medals are discussed. Recommendations move, stall, move again. Witness statements conflict slightly. Counts don't match. Memory blurs. War resists neat conclusions. Eventually, Hale's action will be recognized, maybe fully, maybe partially. Or maybe it will fade into the vast archive of things that mattered deeply to the men there and almost nowhere else. But the ground he held remains American. That matters. Weeks later, when the front pushes forward and St. Lo finally falls, Hale's platoon walks through streets reduced to rubble. New fights replace old ones. New names take the place of his. Still, sometimes, during a lull or while cleaning weapons, someone will mention him. Not loudly, just enough. You can almost feel how the story lingers, not as inspiration, but as warning. That being shot first doesn't mean the fight is finished. That assumptions kill faster than bullets. That the margin between order and collapse can be measured in heartbeats. For the Germans, the lesson is the same, but harder. They won't advance the same way again in that sector. They'll hesitate, spread out, probe longer. That caution will save some of their lives later. Hail saves lives on both sides without ever knowing it. As June turns into July and Normandy grinds forward, the war absorbs his stand the way it absorbs everything else, unevenly, imperfectly, but permanently. No statue will mark the hedgerow where he fell. No sign will note the seconds that changed the fight. But the men who were there carry it with them. And every time a soldier hesitates before assuming a wounded enemy is finished. Every time spacing widens just a little more. Every time confidence gives way to caution. That moment echoes again. The Germans shot him first. The ground learned the rest. July 1944. Somewhere beyond Saint-Lô. The front has moved on. The hedgerow where Thomas Hale fell is already being reclaimed by weeds and shellfire. Tracks cut through the mud. New units rotate in. Maps are redrawn. The war does what it always does, moves forward and leaves places behind. But the moment doesn't leave the men. You can almost feel it in how they fight now. American squads advance a little differently. Spacing is tighter when it needs to be, wider when it matters. When a German falls, no one assumes the fight is finished. Rifles stay up. Fingers stay tight on triggers. Lessons learned the hard way settle into muscle memory. Hale's name isn't spoken as often anymore, but his action is everywhere. In Normandy, survival often comes down to what you believe in the first second of contact. Believe the enemy is finished, and you step forward. Believe he's still dangerous, and you hesitate just long enough to live. That hesitation saves lives. A sergeant in another company will never know Hale's name, but when his men fan out instead of stacking up, when he shouts, "Keep distance," without fully remembering why, Hale is still there. Not as a story, as a reflex. German units feel it too. After-action reports from late summer note increased caution during close assaults, more use of grenades before movement, slower advances through confined terrain. Officers complain about lost momentum, about hesitation. They don't connect it to one man in one hedgerow. But it is connected. Because warfare is not just about weapons and orders. It's about what soldiers expect to happen when the first bullet lands. Hale broke that expectation. He proved, brutally, that being shot first does not always end the fight. Years later, long after the war, historians will argue about numbers, about whether it was truly 38, about whether memory inflated the count, whether shock distorted perception. They will miss the point. The number matters less than the moment. What matters is that a German counterattack collapsed not because it met overwhelming fire, but because it met resistance where none was expected. Hale didn't change the war, but he changed that fight. And that's how wars are actually shaped. Not only by generals and divisions, but by individuals who refuse to behave the way the enemy expects them to. Somewhere decades later, a veteran will try to explain it to someone who wasn't there. He'll struggle for words, shake his head, and finally settle on something simple. He just didn't fall. That's the truth of it. Thomas Hale didn't survive the fight. He didn't get to hear the arguments or the praise. He didn't know how far the ripple would spread. He only knew at the very end that he was still standing. And in those seconds, he took away the enemy's certainty. In war, certainty is everything. Lose it, and even the strongest assault can shatter. The Germans shot him first. They assumed the ground would take him. Instead, the ground remembers.